Hello and welcome to the e-commerce Brain Trust podcast. I'm Julie Spear, head of retail marketplace services at Acadia, alongside my co-host, director of retail accounts, Jordan Ripley. Hey, Jordan. Good to see you again.
Hi, Julie. Thanks for having me.
So today we are doing another replay of a conversation that we had earlier in 2025. And this was a really, really fun one. It is one that we had with Mike Black from Profitero, where we dig into the ROI of search placement, content, and reviews.
Mm-hmm. And this one, we have a lot that we talk about content and sort of conceptually why it's important and how it drives customer conversion. This one I think was interesting in just the scale and depth of the data that Profitero had access to really understand what is that additional benefit if I move from page 2 to page 1 or into the top 10, and kind of dispelling a bit this like endless aisle idea of like, oh, people can find me anywhere, but really tactically, what is that lift when you start to move up within SERP? Just a really, really good in the weeds and data-backed conversation with Mike.
Yeah, and there was also an interesting angle when it came to the idea or came to the topic of the role that reviews play, that it's not just the volume and the star rating, but it's also the velocity. So Mike talked about the data and their research and how it underscored how quickly earning reviews in the first few months of a product launch really, really has an impact on conversion, rank, and therefore longer term performance. So it's not just a digital shelf metric. It's about really impacting the entire omnichannel experience.
Yeah, and a great time around this as folks are sort of locking in finalized budgeting decisions and where you're placing your bets for next year. I think with the dawn of AI-enabled search, organic has not diminished in any way in terms of the importance of showing up in the right place at the right time. So if you're investing in next year, a lot of these fundamentals still hold true of like where you can see lifts from placing the right investments smartly in organic strategy. And so a great time to refresh your memory.
I will not ever jump down from the importance of organic soapbox. So with that, we'll jump into the replay of our conversation with Profitero's Mike Black.
This is the E-commerce Brain Trust, a podcast about building momentum online for established consumer brands. Join our hosts and their expert guests for high-level conversations about e-commerce strategies, trends, and innovations. Access our Brain Trust and boost your brand's e-commerce potential.
Welcome to the e-commerce Brain Trust podcast. I'm Julie Spear, head of retail marketplace services at Acadia, alongside my co-host, Jordan Ripley, director of retail operations. Today, we're joined by Mike Black, the former CMO and current chief growth officer at Profitero. We'll be taking a walk and have conversation around a couple of recent reports that Profitero released that go in depth on the ROI of improving your search placement, as well as the critical importance of ratings and reviews. I'm very excited for this conversation. So welcome to the podcast, Mike. It's great to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here. I am a longtime listener and fan of the podcast.
Okay, we didn't even ask for you to say that. I have in the past prompted that response. That felt genuine. I think.
No, listen, like in this industry, there's certain touchstone podcasts you go to stay up. And a little bit about me, I've been in Profitero coming up in about 7.5 years. So my journey of learning about e-commerce started around 2017. And I was coming out of more of a traditional retail-based business. So as I was looking for resources and looking to learn, this podcast has been a touchstone for that. And I always find it very tactical and specific, and you guys do a great job. So there you go.
Good. I'll take the feedback and we'll continue to reach out to get ideas maybe for other topics to keep it relevant and helpful. That's definitely the goal of this. Well, let's dig in. Jordan and I were saying before we even started, we're huge, huge fans of reports that come out of Profitero and really big fans of this ROI series that you've been releasing since back in 2023. I think it started with the impact of improving content report back in 2023. We've used your reports as kind of a foundation for a lot of ways we talk to our clients about the importance of organic optimization. And it's a soapbox that I have been on for years. And so anytime I can back up with a very compelling report, all the better. We're going to get into the weeds on a couple of these reports, but before we get started on that, I'd love for you to talk to us about how this series came to be. what sort of questions you were looking to answer with the research that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think foundation is maybe important to understand a little bit what Profitero does and sort of how this comes to be. So Profitero at our core, we're e-commerce analytics company, but really we specialize in measuring the digital shelf. And the way we define the digital shelf, there are many definitions out there, but the way we define it is effectively all of the engagement points that a shopper navigates through when they're buying on a marketplace or a retailer website. When you think about that, what does that mean? Well, it means showing where you show up in search. So search is almost like the digital equivalent of the store shelf, and how good your content is. Are you in stock? What's your pricing? So if you think about the journey of a consumer in their path to purchase on a retailer site, that's how we think about the digital shelf. It's all of those components. Our whole mission has been to help brands measure that. And we do that by collecting data every single day on how brands are performing in content, search, availability. One of the things we learned is we were coming out of COVID and a lot more interest in digital shelf is that while we were talking to digital shelf partners in the space whose jobs are digital shelf, they got it. They understand the importance of digital shelf. They're having a hard time communicating the importance of the digital shelf to their internal stakeholders. So much about e-commerce is change management. To get funding for content, to get the funding for search, we have to convince people that don't understand digital shelf that it's worth doing. We saw the data on our side in the ROI, and so we wanted to publish that and create that as an asset that the industry could use to show that the investments that we are making in store, we need to have that level of investment on our digital shelf. And that was really the genesis, was to create a fact base around that. And the reason why we're able to do that is because we not only have the digital shelf data, but we also estimate Amazon market share and sales data. So we have both the digital shelf, we call it the causals, and then all the sales data. And so really the whole report is us triangulating those two data sets to see that impact. That's really where it starts from, is really about putting a spotlight on why it's important to invest in the digital shelf.
That's great. I feel like we touch on this a lot on our show of like media. Sometimes, in our at least humble opinion, you get a clear ROAS metric and it's like, okay, yeah, I put in $1, I get X dollars out of it. And with content, we have all these proxy metrics, right? It's like, what's my organic SOV, or what's some context score that this platform tells me, right? The ROI component for sure is the thing that I feel like our brands find most compelling. And that's where having Profitero create this series has been really helpful for us and something exciting to see. One thing you touched on, though, Mike, is that equivalency of the digital shelf to the physical retail shelf. And I think there's this prevailing idea of, you have the endless shelf online, you have endless assortment, right? So you could just keep adding products to a category and that shelf lengthens and lengthens and lengthens in perpetuity. One thing, though, that at the start of the report that you put out in December, the impact of winning search, was kind of running counter to that. The endless aisle idea is about a limited assortment, but you say the digital shelf actually, in reality, a lot smaller than the physical shelf. Can you expound on that? It's a bold claim, so I'd love to hear more.
Well, yeah, and I think when I first came into the industry, I was confused about it too. I was like, oh, it is the endless aisle. But then the one you realize is it's really around the limiters that consumers put around how far they're going to go search. So we know, and there's other stats out there that say 70% of sales happen on page one. And then in our own statistics, what we've consistently found is that if you move from page 2 to page 1, you get a pretty significant lift. And then if you go from page 1 to top 10 to top 5, you get lift. So really, most of the volume in sales is concentrated in a very small set of real estate. So it's like you can have 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 items in the category online, but most of what people are going to see and engage on is on page 1, and really now 10 and 5. And on a phone, it's like a thumb, right? Whatever your thumb is on is probably what is going to see it. So that's where it really kind of shifted, and really saying it's not really endless because the consumer's willingness to click beyond is not endless. What is a little more endless, or what is more interesting about it, is unlike a store where we think about the aisle, and you think about the aisle in a way, it's all about having eye level space, and we want that eye level space in store. We fight for it, we pay for it. And online, it's the equivalent of getting that top 5 spot. What's different about store is that there's only one aisle. walk down the aisle and the sign above is like cat food. Whereas really online, it's more about every keyword is its own aisle. So it's really about a real estate game of winning the top space on those right keywords and making sure that in aggregate, you're moving the needle and getting the kind of breadth and coverage on those terms that reflect what consumers are actually looking for. That's really where the game is won and lost.
Right. Yeah.
You mentioned some of the stats of the value of moving from page 2 to page 1 and what it can mean in terms of revenue and sales increases for brands. So I'm going to rattle off some stats here. This is the heavy sportsy type portion of the conversation where it's all stats driven. In the report, you noted that to move from page 2 to page 1 organically increases sales 40%. Moving to the top 10 spots increases sales by 57%. And even further, if you move to the top 5 organic placements, sales increase by 89% on average, which is incredible. Which it goes to, like you said, the aisle is only as long as your thumb on your phone. That's where the thumb stops or covers up the rest. But something that surprised me about going further into those stats was that your report found that sales actually outpaced traffic increases, and that it was conversion increased as products climbed up in organic positioning. So not only do you get more of the traffic, but that traffic actually converts at a higher rate. What is your hypothesis on why that is what we're seeing?
Yeah, from a conversion rate perspective, I think on the sales side, we often see this kind of relationship. It gets really tricky on a site. This is really magic between conversion and traffic that plays. Some of the factors around why conversion might increase would be related to maybe there is some other effects going on with, like, see reviews plays a big role.
Yes, the trust.
What drives organic is really interesting, right? Because what drives organic tends to be review based. If we're kind of moving a lot of things through reviews, or the thing that's driving my product up in search is some higher quality content, higher quality review, then I think what we're seeing is that those products moving onto page 1 are also getting healthier in a conversion metric. And there's some sort of virtual cycle happening there that's really helping them. So I think that what really drives your organic search beyond keywords and stuff is really your conversion. So as you grow your conversion and you improve that, you're going to get moving up in search, which is going to result in the traffic. And then the sales will be the outcome of that. So I think what we're seeing is the journey to page 1 is a journey of improving your product's conversion. And because that is happening, that's why we're seeing a lot of that movement happening on the organic page.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The other thing too I think about is like, speculative based on the way that I shop, but a high consideration purchase, right? I'm probably willing to go to further layers of SERP to try to make sure I'm finding the exact right product. But like a low consideration purchase, I'm fine clicking that first product and hitting buy now. I think particularly as practitioners of digital shelf optimization, there's a temptation to think that search behavior is uniform across the entirety of SERP. And in reality, if you're dominating those top 3 spots, you're probably getting a lot of people that are low consideration purchasers and are just happy to click through the first one, convert on that without having to read all the. For sure, conversion is driving you up there. But I feel like, as you said, there's a virtuous cycle here of maintaining that position and getting the sort of easy sales that flow through positions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's cool. The other thing that stood out to me, and I was geeking out about this report as well, is the difference between organic and paid. And that if you move into a top 10 organic position, you get nearly 3 times larger lift than if you're to get there solely from a paid position increase. This was another one where I was like, okay, I think this makes sense, but I'm curious, as the folks that collected this data, is this a function of more people just click through organic positions? There's more volume that flows through organic than do paid positions? Or does that track fundamentally different? I'm just curious why, or is it a more sustainable position? Like, why as a brand is that organic position more favorable for me if I can get it?
Well, I think it's about relevance. I think when you think about what gets advertised versus what gets served up organically, there's a sort of, from a consumer lens, there's a sort of a higher degree of relevance being determined by the retailer algorithm. I mean, that's the algorithm's job. Is the algorithm is supposed to say, based on what you surfaced, I want to give you the thing that I think is most likely to click and convert based on all the data I have. And that's based on the keywords, it's based on conversion and views. And so as a consumer, the retailer algorithm, I may look past the paid search because the paid search could be things that are not relevant to me. There are things that the brand is trying to convince me are relevant to me, but it's not necessarily what I may think. And I think we all have different lenses for looking at ads.
Yeah.
Like I do sometimes as a consumer, I will go past the paid search ad because in some degrees I want to get to the result that I know is being recommended by the retailer because I know that that is probably maybe got a badge on it. Maybe it's got some other proof points that I know I'm going to trust. And I'm probably going to see the high reviews versus the paid ad. I might see an ad for a product that doesn't have those reviews. So I kind of see it more as it's the reward of being truly relevant and earning that spot where the retailer is basically advocate saying, I've looked at all the options and I think this is the best one I want to show you first.
Right. And to your point, like over the long term, there's ways you can manipulate organic ranking in the short term, but in the long term, your product has to be like good relevance, good conversion fit, and to climb to that position. And whereas like the manipulation on the paid side can perhaps be a little bit more sustainable if you put a paid thumb on the scale.
Yeah. And that gets back to what we're going to talk about a little bit later is reviews. Because reviews is the thing you have to work hard to earn to get to that relevance. And then that's the reward there. And for consumer, our reaction to reviews is very instinctual and almost immediate. Like this passes the sniff test or this doesn't. Yeah.
Well, let's get there now.
Yes.
Right to all the segue heavy lifting for us.
Very smooth. You just leave you wondering where we're headed next. Well, let's talk about the most recent ROI research paper, which is titled Unlocking the Value of Consumer Reviews. And in this, you cite a Profitero stat that talks about where nearly half of all shoppers that are in store actually research the product online for product reviews. So they can get a better sense of the product that's under consideration. This is one of those stats that I think kind of highlights a trap that we can fall into. We can think about like working for reviews based on the channel that we're focused on. But this really shows that the value of reviews transcends just the singular channel. Do you think this is something that brand side teams are actually paying attention to, or is it a topic that gets a little siloed?
Oh, well, you set me up because silos. Yes, silos. I will talk about silos all day. I use the word silos so much. Okay, so yes. So I think what you're referencing is, in addition to doing the ROI studies about 2 years ago, I think 2 years ago, we did a study called the Digitally Influenced Shopper. And this was a consumer survey that we did. We basically wanted to get what we felt was that we continue to see brands kind of cite digital penetration is the metric of success for e-com. Like, hey, e-commerce is just 10% of our sales, so why should we care? But we know there's a hidden iceberg behind that because we know that consumers are digitally influenced. It means they're looking at phones or looking at the digital shelf. They're all throughout shopping. And Forrester was really the first to kind of come up with that. And so Forrester hadn't done that study in a while. And we thought, well, we just came out of an intense period of time post-COVID. Let's look at where it came. And we found that that's exactly what you were saying, that more than half of consumers are researching on their phones before they go to store and while they're in store. And they're looking at, number one, their price shopping, but they're also looking at reviews, number two. What that kind of means is as we think about the investment of reviews and the ROI, we have found that it definitely drives a sales impact in line, but it's also impacting the total store shopping experience. It is important that that gets understood by the whole organization. And what we do see is that there are some silos where teams that are managing, let's say, traditional sales on brick and mortar may just say, well, reviews is kind of this thing that I think the digital commerce team takes care of, like they got it. But what we've seen is that it can have an impact in store. And here's where it gets really interesting is the more negative reviews you get, the more your conversion rate's going to go down. And also, as a result of that, you're going to lose organic rank. So what we find often when we analyze review sentiment for brands is that about a third of the negative reviews for an omni-channel retailer are not because of what the brand did. It's because of what the retailer did. Either there was a substitution or there was a bad delivery experience. Now, if I'm sitting in the brick and mortar space and I'm looking at, click and collect sales and sales happening in stores, my sales are being penalized because of things. So what that creates an opportunity is to take to the retailer and say, hey, we got to work on this. There's something happening in the operations of the customer experience when they come to pick up a product, or you ship it to them, or you deliver it to the home, that they're not getting what they want. And that's penalizing us. That's just an example of where that digital shelf data could go. It doesn't happen that way because, yes, the digital shelf teams tend to live in a silo. And there hasn't been the perfect connection back to the traditional business. We're all still learning that because it hasn't been so long that we've become omni-channel, and organizations are still trying to figure out how to use and leverage all that data. But that's a really good example where reviews drives an impact that's going to affect the omni-channel experience in the physical store as well.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, for all of the woes that Amazon has had with their actual brick and mortar retail presence, when they unveiled the little star rating placards that they would have on their in-store that would be 4.5-star product or whatever, and they would actually bring in the online reviews into the in-store shelf. And I was like, that seems to hit on what you've described here of making it easier for the customer to connect the digital shelf to the physical in-store. Now, lots of other issues with the Amazon brick and mortar channel, but I do think that, to your point, Mike, the more internally orgs can connect that and then retailers can connect that, since the consumer's already doing it. It's just, how do you make that easier for them and make it a positive experience throughout?
Yeah, exactly. We scratch the surface and we talk about this in the paper. There's a tangible sales ROI to reviews, but there's these other intangible ones, and being able to actually affect change in brick and mortar. What you said is a great example too, where we've seen brands be able to bring in online reviews in the merchandising of their products in stores. And then also the other untapped huge value is actually being able to learn what consumers are saying and change your product or change your messaging, which we see a lot when you launch a new product. You don't always nail the messaging, and online people can be confused. And sometimes those reviews are the best real-time consumer feedback you can get to the marketing team to be we've got someone that's really confused about how this product works. We got to fix it. I would say of all the digital shelf metrics, reviews is the most untapped, but it's having its resurgence right now, I'd say.
Well, and I wonder how much the role of AI and Rufus, especially just looking at Amazon alone and the summary of reviews that leads the whole rundown. I know as a consumer myself, I look at that more than I used to scroll through and read and see what I could learn. But that summary is super powerful in terms of consumer behavior. So I do think we are just kind of scratching the surface of the impact and power of reviews and the importance of getting it right. On that, one of the things that you talk about in your report is you hit on the impact of review velocity. We all know that review quality and quantity is important, but one of the things that your report highlights is the impact on sales of when you move within the first 2 months of launching a product from that 0 to, let's say, on the path to 50 reviews. When you move through that within 2 months, you see your product placement and results grow at a rate much higher than if it took you, let's say, 6 months to hit that. Really, what we're seeing here is that it's not just about getting quality reviews and a certain volume of reviews. It's about the pace with which you're collecting them. Can you talk to me a little bit more about how you saw that play out further in your research?
Yeah, so I would say the first 50 important because it all gets back to, again, to the ultimate goal is to win sales velocity. Sales velocity in getting the algorithm sort of set and trained and getting that engine going is so important. And when you launch a new product, you have a burden of trying to convince people that it's a real item. And I think people can appreciate when they look at an item that was just launched, that it's a new item. And unless they see some kind of sufficient amount of reviews for that item being new, then they may not trust that it's worth it. This is kind of the version of trial. We talk about trial in industry, trying to get trial. Online trial comes from social proof. So it's really important that we've seen is getting that product to the first 50 is really critical to establish that social proof. And then it also sort of starts to train the algorithm that this is a legitimate product, that not only is this product hitting the keywords that consumers are searching for, but it's actually valuable. So that's why it's really important. Now, I've written about this before, and I've seen this play out in a couple cases where I've looked at two products once in the cereal category, launched by competitors at the same time, and same exact time in store and online. One started within the first couple months with 200, 300 reviews, and the other one started with like 18, 20 reviews. As a consumer, and you look at those two products side by side, and you're like, oh, these are new products. Like, which one are you going to feel more confident about? Everything in the pacing of what we say is the caveat here is we're giving you general stats to go by and saying, okay, generally you want to get to 50, but everything you do in the digital shelf is relative to your competitor. The success for one category is going to be different for the other. And the reason why velocity matters is it's always a competition of earning that trust. So if you're adding reviews, positive reviews, let's say 5 a month, and your competitor is adding positive reviews at 20 a month, that's going to make a big difference because someone's going to look at your product and their product and what kind of determination are they going to make. This is why while we produce these general stats, we encourage brands to actually go into the digital shelf data and actually look at review velocity as a metric and say, at what rate are we adding new reviews relative to our competitors? Or do we feel good about that? And that's why I just think the concept of review velocity is just an important KPI that people need to start building into their scorecards.
Yeah. For something that's low consideration as cereal, right? Even if reviews make a difference there, you can imagine what it means for like a television or something like that.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the things is high consideration. Oftentimes what we find is like, yes, there's high consideration. And then sometimes brands will be, well, I'm in a low consideration category. Like it doesn't really matter. Well, it does matter for new products. And a lot of the CPG brands, food brands are always launching new stuff. So it matters really for those new items that, especially or efficacy-based products, it's going to matter a ton.
Yeah. The other thing where in the report, this stat stood out to me, which again confirms, I think, what we all sort of hold at the gut level, but to see the numbers were stark, which is, you go from sub 4 to 4 stars, average sales increase by 16%, past, I think, the sniff test of what we'd all expect. But then you say that of all the unit sales coming from products at a given category, 98% of those are from 4-star rating products or higher. So we talk about page one doing 70% of the sales, but like 4-star products are doing 98% of the sales. So if I'm a brand owner, it's like my number one thing is circling the wagons around my products and making sure I'm not getting under 4 stars. Yeah. I can think of very few recent conversations with brands where we're going product by product and saying, are you at a 3.9? How do we prevent this from a 3.8 and something? But it seems like it's that important. Is this one of those other kind of overlooked but soon to change, perhaps, strategic levers?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Most of what you kind of nailed it is a lot of what we try to get out of these data are insights about what I'll call like these triggers. If we're managing a portfolio of hundreds of thousands of products, we have to find these triggers, which is like a threshold has been crossed of which we know is really, really bad, and cut out the noise. And what you already said is we know that almost all the sales are going to be concentrated in the 4s. When something dips below into 3s, we know that that is an early indicator of a sales loss that we're going to see in our data in the next couple of weeks. So I always think about the digital shelf as early indicators. They're canaries in the coal mine. And so what you want to try to figure out is what's that canary in the coal mine? And generally speaking, you're right, it's 3.9. So a lot of our clients will set up alerts and they'll sort of say, all right, I want to be able to set an alert to show me anytime this happens. And then that will kick off an investigation. And then we will find out, like an earlier example I told you, is maybe the problem is product confusion problem, or maybe the problem is an operational problem that we don't even own, but we can talk to the retailer about influencing. So yeah, absolutely right. I think that sub 4 is a big jump. The optics of that to a consumer is
not great.
It's really optics, really.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Mike, this has been a ton of fun. I do want to make sure to give you a chance to plug, because I know that there's plenty more reports in this ROI series to come. Can you give us a sneak peek of what's coming along outside after these 2 successful ones?
So we're currently working on updating our content report, which I know is something you mentioned earlier. So we're going through that and taking a fresh look at how sales, traffic, and conversion change relative to hitting certain benchmarks and bestseller benchmarks, which is something we've done before, but we're kind of taking a fresh look at it. So one of the things at Profitero we're really excited about, and what we've been really focused on, has been really going deeper in the analytics we can provide around content. We are providing some more richness in terms of understanding if your content is set up for success with how the algorithm works, flagging what those issues are, as well as better prescriptively recommending keywords that can drive your organic search. So as part of that, we've developed some new benchmark capabilities by retailer, looking at what must be true for you to rise up in the seller ranking. So we're going to be bringing out some fresh benchmarks and some ROI stats around that. So that is something we're pretty excited about coming up in the next month or so.
Ooh.
Perfect. All right. Singing our love language.
Exactly. Very much mine. Very, very much mine.
We're open to ideas. Like if you got some things you want to look at, I mean, we're really open to other things. So if you guys want to go see something, or anybody listening wants to see something, we love that. And some of our best ideas have always been inspired by a question that someone wants to answer, just hasn't been able to. So our team's here to help.
I love that.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a great conversation today. I'm really excited for the content report to come out, and we might have to have you back after another couple of reports in the series come out. We'll have to dig into those and have a good conversation about them as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Mike.